Well, I'm Lynn Fraser with the Kilby Center for Recovery. I'm really happy to be here today with Berns Galloway. He's a senior trainer, works worldwide training people with somatic experiencing. And Berns, why don't you go ahead and kind of tell us a little bit about your personal story, what got you interested in this kind of work, and what it is that you do?
Um, I got interested by seeing a poster for an introduction to this model in
Mhm.
1999, and I went and I got very excited about what was being proposed around trauma, and it spoke to me personally because as someone who stutters, I thought this would be something that might help me, believing that my stutter was trauma based. So I signed up, and that was 2000. Finished the training in 2003, and so that's what got me interested. And so I do talk about that during trainings and about my stutter, and that this is what people will hear, and that yeah, even though I've done all that training and work, there's still a stutter that I have, and it is nothing like it once was. So I'm much more fluent, and I do attribute that to this model, not 100%, but I do notice a different experience of myself when I'm with people in a group who've come together, gathering to look at this work or look at this model. And
Mhm.
so it's something that supports me to be more myself, more in my body, more regulated, as we talk about. And so
Mhm.
that's how I started, and I've been involved since then.
What did you do before that?
I was a therapist, psychotherapist, working in a nonprofit agency
Mhm.
for a long time, and then I had a private practice as well, and then gradually moved out of that world and into the SE world, and started
Wow.
teaching in 2008.
Okay. And do you have a private practice with SE now, or is it all
No, I just
teaching?
teach now. Yeah.
Okay.
No, I'm not home
So,
enough to practice.
okay. Yeah. So it strikes me that most people that get involved in some kind of therapy, and in particular in somatic therapy, there's something going on in the nervous system for a lot of us.
Mhm.
What's your sense of the people that are attracted into the training program for somatic?
There's, I don't know if there's two kinds of people. There are people who um, so when I started, it was the idea of trauma wasn't as popular as it is now, and
Right.
the information about the nervous system wasn't as well known then. But there were people who were who, when they heard about this, said, "Oh, that's the missing piece. That's what I'm not getting to, or that's what's not been available for me to support other people to do what they need to do."
Hmm.
So there were a lot of people who've come into awareness of this model, or who've done the training because of this sense of the body being the missing piece.
Right.
So there's been lots of people working with the body for a while, but there was something about this nervous system experience of the body
Right.
that have attracted people. And then now there's a younger crowd, let's say, who are attracted to this work because of the growing information out there around what trauma is and how it gets into the body. Um, so it's a different generation of people now who are coming through compared to when I started.
Right.
Yeah.
Hmm. So what's your experience of working with the younger crowd? A lot of people say, "Oh, those millennials." You know, is that your experience, or what's
No,
your
no,
experience? Not
no.
at all.
They're
They're so
they're
passionate and they want something to mean something.
yes, that's right. And they have less history to work against in terms of their own training.
Ah, right.
So the helping profession has a particular approach, and some of those more traditional approaches of, like, just for example, paraphrasing and interpretation, very classical ways of working with people that are not necessarily that helpful in this particular model. So we want to use our client's language, and we want to be observing and curious about what's happening versus, well, this is what I think is happening for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so the younger generation is less entrenched in that. While that's still part of their training, they haven't had as much practice.
Right.
Mhm.
So there might be a bit more openness.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then for the older people, there's that sense of the body is the missing link.
Yes.
So talk therapy is helpful in many ways, and we need to be healing through the body.
And we need to be including it in the work, uh,
Right.
versus it just being this thing out there that somebody else might approach or might work with. But it seems to be essential.
Right. So can you give us a sense of what the training would be like? Like what kinds of things do you do in the training?
Well, my personal bias is, we learn from having the experience. So there's lots of books, there's lots of people talking about working with people, and I certainly talk about it, but I also spend a lot of time there, inviting people to be experiencing their own body response. So
Mhm.
it's not just the body response, but I I I think to get good at this, to be really effective with people, is that we need to have the experience ourselves. We need to embody. So if you were spending time with me in class, there would be time where I talk and time where we engage, and then there's time where you would be having an experience to the degree that that you're available for that. But it's a highly experiential process, um, because I want you to have the sense from the inside, not just from here.
Right. Given that it's a somatic
Mhm.
healing process, that really makes sense. So you just said to the degree that you're available.
Yes.
Can you say a bit more about that?
Well, not everybody wants to have a direct experience in the classroom or in practice. They're coming with a particular expectation of this top-down perspective, and so
Okay.
there's a degree of willingness,
Mhm.
and then there's a degree of availability. So over the three years of the training, people become more and more available,
Right.
just through experience.
Mhm.
And transition and the transformation from day one to day 36 over 3 years is quite noticeable, where people tend to become much more available and more, um, what we talk about is having more capacity
Right, right.
for that felt sense, somatic experience, as well as more capacity to be able to sit with someone who brings anything to them and
Yeah.
stay present with that. Mhm.
Do you have any people come to mind, any short stories about how that, what it looks like on the ground working with people?
Mm. Just this week, some people were talking about how much they noticed they could, like, they weren't as tired when they worked. They
Mhm.
could be with the same caseload or the same number of people, and maybe people with more challenging life history,
Mhm.
and they could be with people and not be so tired or not tired at all because
Right.
the way of working with people is different. We don't have to work so hard,
Right.
but the demand is to be present and to be attuned, which is different than working hard.
It is, and that's a capacity that we build too.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
part of this process. So part of the capacity is about my availability just to be right here,
Right.
and and at the same time know that there's nothing I have to do.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And so one of the themes that I support with the participants is that your your presence is more important than your competence. And so
Mhm.
just be here now. Just show up first
Right.
as best
Yeah.
as possible. And then what needs to happen is more likely to happen.
Right. So, what is it that gets in the way of being present?
Oh, fear is a big part.
There is a big
Fear
one.
is
Yeah.
a big part. And in training, there's practice and you're being observed by two or three other people. So that there's this fear of judgment,
Yeah.
the shame
Hmm.
of what one thinks of oneself or what we think others are thinking, and the doing something new or different takes me out of my sense of being competent, and so then I don't like that, and so then all my ways of dealing with that get in the way of just being here. And so we spend a lot of time normalizing that and playing. For me, in training, practice is just play. We're going off to experiment. It's not a session, it's just practice. And
Hmm.
we're playing with the model. And if you're the person I'm working with, and I'm the practitioner, you're lending me your nervous system to play with,
Ah, right.
and you get to choose how much of that.
Hmm.
But it's just play. And so we just keep reinforcing that again and again, and people have a different response. And and the process is very, very collaborative, so that it's not somebody telling you what to do. It's so what are you observing, sensing, thinking that has you doing or saying what is happening now, and
So,
not taking it too seriously.
and not, yeah, yeah, that's something that tends to get lost when there's a lot of fear in the room.
Mhm.
Is we do tend to take it quite seriously.
That's right. And
Yeah.
so one of my objectives for practice is that people have fun.
Hmm.
And if you're not having fun, what's in the way? And often just being serious is because I have to do it right. That that gets in the way.
Yeah.
So there's the fear of judgment, fear of being observed, and then there's the fear of I won't do it right.
Right.
And so we work on that, or we spend time looking at what's right and what's not right, how
Right.
how we define that.
So, if you have someone who would be probably pretty typical, who has been shamed for not getting it right when they were younger, and they are now in this really important training, they really want to, they have a passion for helping, and they really want to get it right. What are some of the ways that you would work with that?
Well, sometimes we have to have that direct conversation about what is in the way, what is
Right.
what from before might be at play here. And
Okay.
um, and do you notice that when you think you've made a mistake, what the response is by anybody else?
Right.
Is what you're afraid of happening in terms of a of a consequence?
Right.
People are afraid that it's going to be damaging or hurtful to another, and I hold people I hold people being able to be responsible for their own experience. And so I encourage people to set the limit of how much they lend, how much they play in terms of what feels okay and what doesn't feel okay.
Right.
So people are given a lot of permission. Some have the capacity to know how to really gauge that, and some have systems that aren't as cooperative, let's say,
Right.
and their capacity to contain their own experience is compromised, and so it becomes challenging. But people are never out there by themselves in practice in the training. There is always an assistant with them, so there's always the support.
Okay.
That's another tricky bit is our comfort in being able to receive or ask for support.
Right.
And so it's ironic that here we are in the business of being supportive of people, but it's really hard to ask for support for ourselves.
Right.
Yeah.
So you have two trainees. One is giving the session, the other is receiving the session.
Well, and we don't call it a session because it's
Oh, okay.
practice, right? So
Okay.
so the word session sets up a certain seriousness.
Okay.
No, it's a session, so now I have to be a certain way,
Oh,
a
okay. Yeah.
certain result. But no, it's just practice.
It's just practice. Okay.
Just
So
practice.
one person is the facilitator of the practice, the other
Yeah,
person is receiving it.
that's right. Or a
Or
lender. Yeah.
lender. Okay.
Mm.
So
Right.
that
And
person receiving is lending their nervous system
yeah,
for the purpose of the practice to play.
right. That's right. So the focus is on the prac- practitioner's learning.
The practitioner's learning. Okay. Right.
And so there's an observer
Mhm.
and there's an assistant.
Okay. So it would seem that the person who's receiving would have a lot of opportunity to observe their own
Mhm.
system, because what you're asking them to do is be conscious of where they're at, so that they're engaging in a way that feels safe for them, or
That's right. That's right. That's right.
right.
And that observation is critical, which is also it's a critical piece of the model. Is that as long as we can be a witness to our own experience, we can continue with the process. But trauma challenges that witness or the
Yes.
observer, right?
Yeah.
So being overwhelmed, it becomes harder to witness our own experience, and so that's always a gauge. As long as you're observing your own experience and response, we're good.
Right. And so when you check out, dissociate, or you go into freeze or something,
Mhm,
and you're not able to stay present,
mhm.
so what would happen then?
Well, it would be ideal if the one practicing can recognize that, but if they don't, then the assistant is there.
Okay.
And so the assistant pauses and slides in quite often just to engage the learning process.
Oh, okay.
And so that person's job is also as a guardian of that state
Right.
of overwhelm. And
Right.
sometimes it's very subtle
Mhm.
and it's not a difficult process, and sometimes it's a little bigger,
Right.
but more often it's subtle and not causing much issue at all.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
So it comes to mind when I teach yoga, the first principle in yoga and meditation is ahimsa,
Uh-huh.
or non-harming. And when you tell a class the first principle is ahimsa, non-harming, but they're not in their body,
Yeah.
then how could they possibly do that? Part of what you're doing is having people learn about their own nervous system
Hmm.
so that they're able to recognize what's going on. And then when there's things that are coming up that are causing disconnection, then they can identify that and say that.
Hmm. Hmm.
So what about if it's a practitioner, if the person who's giving, if they check out, is
Same
that what the
thing,
assistant
same
does?
thing.
Same thing.
That's right. That's right. And so the one of the first interventions in the pause that the assistant might do is say, "So, what's happening for you right now?
Ah,
Where are you?"
mm,
Right? And some people have that awareness. Oh, I'm somewhere else, or I'm here, and it's like, I don't know if you are, but here we are.
right. Here we are looking at that. Yeah.
So, but the first thing is just to come back,
Right.
just to come back. And it happens all the time because we get into this place of, oh, I don't know what to do. And do I do this or that? And I'm thinking and thinking, and I'm not here now.
Right.
I'm so caught in what I should do that I've left in a way.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Right. So when you are working with that, do you use breathing? Do you do relaxation practices? Like, what are some of the things that you do?
We just direct people back into themselves just through the engagement. Now,
Okay.
if I see someone has stopped breathing, I might say, "Oh, I've noticed you're not breathing." So
Okay.
unless they're turning blue, I'm not going to say, "Now I want you to take a breath."
Right. Right. You usually just bringing awareness to the breath is enough. They'll start
That's
to
right.
breathe.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Right. And and then once that they're back or a little bit more here, then so engage them more about what are they like, what are they observing, whether it's for themselves or for who they're with. What are they what's what is getting your attention?
Okay.
And then we go from there again. But and then as we have a dialogue about that, it can stimulate someone to um, become more clear on the direction, because something got someone's attention.
Right.
Then there's meaning about it. There's a response to that, and then what what do they think would be now the next piece or the next step, or what might be more helpful in the response to who they're working with.
Right. Right. So So I understand that this is a process that unfolds
Mhm.
over 3 years. Are people practicing on people during that time?
Well, we encourage that to happen.
Mhm,
Uh, we support people to practice.
mhm.
People are some people take it back the next day into their work and do as much of what they can with what they've got.
Mhm,
Some people choose to wait until they have more of the pieces.
mhm.
But we see the difference with people who practice in between or who are part of a study group,
Mhm.
that they stay engaged and they stay fresher. And so then when they come back several months later to the next module, we can see that they've been involved.
Right, right. So how does this relate to working with addiction? I know that not everybody who's working with somatic experiencing works with addiction. But if somebody comes in with, for instance, a binge eating disorder or, an alcohol issue or something like that, what would it kind of look like? Do you have a sense of what it might look like for them?
Well, what it would look like with me is me being curious about what it is in terms of a pattern. When does that what when does that be- behavior show up? What's
Hmm.
the pattern of it?
Hmm.
And I would talk about it as not a like that's not the problem. It creates problems, but this is a symptom.
Right. Hmm.
And so, what is it managing? If you didn't do this, what would be happening instead? And so the person is doing the thing they do because it's the best choice they know,
Right. Hmm.
and they need other options. But to move to a different option means to let go of something that's holding everything together.
Right.
So before they can let go, there needs to be a certain level of stability and a certain level of control. Because until we have control, we can't let it go.
Right.
And to let go of drinking or a certain way of being in the world that helps them, they need to have something else to hold on to, maybe something that's not so challenging or so compromising.
Right. So, what would that process look like if you were working with somebody who had a pretty entrenched pattern
Well,
and had,
yeah,
childhood trauma or something that was the
well,
driver?
we need to work on for a while creating a connection, because you're not going to start to tell me things about your patterns or your life really until you feel safe enough.
Right. Right.
Now, to feel safe can take a long time, because that's an internal experience versus, oh well, I know you're a nice person and I know you're not going to hurt me. Like, I know all that, but I have things happening in my body that keep saying that 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 I'm not safe here, which
Right.
may not have anything to do with you or this context, but just talking to a person I don't really know
Right.
has other associations.
Hmm.
So until I get to know you, then I'm not going to really share as much as I might, because it's also covered in shame.
Right.
So that's a very big piece. So
Hmm.
we're going to spend time getting to know each other, and I'm going to attune to you as best as I can. And based on on how serious the symptoms might be, or how life threatening your choices might be, that will determine how fast I work, or what kind of a demand I place on you.
Hmm.
Um, so if you're not in any danger, but you do engage in these choices that are challenging for your health, um, but it's been there for a while.
Hmm.
Um, I want to know what it is you want in being here.
Hmm.
What what is it you would like to be different?
Hmm.
And then we go from there. People will say, well, I want to stop this thing I do, whether it's drinking or some other choice. Um, but as soon as try to stop, I feel terrified all the time.
Right.
And so there is something that the behavior is managing that
Right.
they don't know what else to do about.
Hmm.
So we can certainly explore options, but that's a top-down process, which will be very helpful. And then we have to find ways to get into the body, but that won't happen unless there's enough stabilization.
Okay.
And so those various top-down strategies can support more stabilization, more witness, more presence, and then we can start to make some interventions into the body.
So what would
Such as,
that look like?
well, it might just look like so. As as you let yourself just look around the space here, as you just look
Hmm.
around the room to the degree that feels okay,
Hmm.
notice what happens inside as you do that. So if the client is then orienting, there's usually a response. There can be changes in the breath pattern. Do they feel that? And so somebody looks around and they take in some of the details, and then they can feel a little different. Do they notice that?
Right.
Times they do, sometimes they don't, but that takes practice.
So people are being helped to kind of be more aware of what's going on energetically in their body, their breath.
More from a sensory experience.
Okay.
So energetic, maybe, but as you look around and notice something you like, and you let yourself take it in visually, if it's something you see,
Hmm.
what happens inside as you sit with that? Is there a change in your breath? Is there a change in your muscle tone?
Hmm.
Is there a particular sensation inside that happens as you look at that thing that you like?
Hmm.
Um, those can be subtle and harder for some people who don't have a lot of experience. Um, we might have to start with what you prefer. As you look out the window and you see that tree, would you do you prefer to look at that, or do you prefer to look at me, or the plant in here, or the picture on the wall, or that you know mark on the floor? Like what's your preference?
Oh, okay.
Preference can reflect a somatic process without having a lot of information about. It's just, oh well, I like looking outside. Oh,
Hmm.
and what is it about that? Well, I just like it. And
Hmm.
so, okay, so let's, you know, within their within their level of patience to explore that,
Hmm.
they'll just notice that you prefer to look at the tree outside, and something inside happens that lets you know that that's true.
Right.
And so, I'm not going to try to make the person tell me what it is if it's just not there.
Right.
And it can sound like a weird question or a weird reflection for
Hmm.
someone who's not accustomed to that. So it's just to notice there's a preference.
Right. So it does feel very kind of non-directed. It's more of a noticing and a tuning in.
Mhm, mhm,
And then the practitioner, you mentioned that you stay attuned to the
mhm,
person.
mhm. I'm paying attention to what they're saying, what they're not saying, what their body's doing or not doing in terms of 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 an autonomic response to what we're talking about. And
Right.
and then I'm going to make a choice about what I directly reflect. So either it's something I hear, something I see, some sense of I see, some communication of that I see you
Right.
and that I'm with you, and I'm conveying that by what I'm paying attention to. Um, and for some people, that can be pretty unfamiliar. Somebody being attuned, somebody being present with them,
Right.
and I have to watch for, when I say, "Oh, I can see that you just took a big breath." Some people might take that as, "Oh, you're really scrutinizing me. You see
Oh,
everything." And
right, right,
so, and then it becomes too hard for them to think they're being seen so much.
right,
Um, so the the attunement is also in response to how much is enough.
right, right.
Hopefully.
Yeah, yeah, hopefully. So some people would find it quite threatening
So
to have someone paying that close of attention.
that's right. That's right. And so hopefully I pick that up and and adapt. Mhm,
Right.
mhm.
So a lot of the training is around knowing the nervous system and the responses and how to read that in people.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So we're what we're watching for, we're observing with our whole body
Right.
the other's response, and then
Right.
and then joining with that.
Hmm.
And the more that we get that, and the more that we join that, the other then begins to have a different response, which can be a reflection of feeling safer.
Right. Right. So how do you work with people wanting to fix other people?
Well, sometimes I do the Dr. Phil thing and say, "So how is it working for you?"
Okay. Yeah.
Because there are lots of people who come and they have this bias that it's their job, and that's what makes them feel good, is
Right.
they can
Mhm.
fix people.
Yeah.
And so we talk about the difference between joining and merging with people,
Oh.
and
Hmm.
that the joining is about being with and being alongside, and our boundaries meet. There's contact, but we stay in our own chair, and we stay in our own skin.
Hmm.
And merging is when this happens, where I lose a sense of myself. I I think I know what you need, and I know how it'll be better for you, and if you just do this, it'll all be good. And I take on responsibility that's not mine.
Okay.
And so one of the signs that that's happened is that I get really tired because I'm
Oh,
working so hard,
yeah.
because it's my job.
Hmm.
And I know all these things to do, and then I have to really convince you into agreeing to do all these things, because then you'll get better.
Right.
And then you don't, and then I get reactive, or I get caught in that,
Right.
or I go for another consultation. I go for another consultation, and I do another workshop, and I read another book, because I really have to know how to work with this person. And then I take them home in my mind, and I'm planning and thinking, and then I dread it when I see their name in my book for the next appointment, things like that. It's like,
Right.
something's off here, where where I'm doing too much. So I'm not joined in the way that would be more helpful.
More helpful for them. So if someone recognizes that, is that because of their own something that they need to work on internally themselves usually?
Right. That's the sign to me that there's something that I need to have a look at.
Right.
Right. What is it about this idea that it's my job to fix them?
Right.
What's that got to do with me? Because it's that's none of my business, really. That this person, has to do this or this or this. That's not my job.
Right. So your job is to be present.
Mhm.
and to know about the nervous system and to help them
Mhm.
just kind of be attuned to them.
That's right.
Yeah.
So degree of stability supports my response. So if you are not at all stable and you're a danger to yourself, well, then I have to do something different than if you were somebody else who just was not in that category. Um, and your history is how you know people care about you is they take care of you,
Oh,
and
right.
then you're going to try to get me to do that because that's what you know.
Hmm.
I'm going to not do that because I know something else,
Right.
as long as I'm aware of that. But if that's my pattern as well,
Right.
then I've been enlisted to reinforce something that may not be as helpful.
Right. Right. So when people have, and I know in somatic experiencing with Peter Levine, he certainly works with people that are highly traumatized.
Mhm, mhm,
And I'm sure that you do as well. And so if somebody has such a level of fear in their body,
mhm,
they don't really trust other people.
mhm,
Um, and you talked about that a little bit. That first you have to kind of get to know each other and establish safety.
mhm.
So how do you work with that when someone's kind of stuck and the progress might be there, but it's really slow?
Well, they have come for a reason. They're here because they want something,
Hmm.
and so I get interested in what they want,
Ah,
and I get interested in what they've done before to try to get what they want. What's worked before? What didn't work before?
hmm.
And for someone with a pretty significant trauma history and symptoms, they have probably seen many people before.
Right. Hmm.
And they've seen many people before because they didn't get what they wanted or needed.
Right.
And it could be because the people they went to didn't have an appreciation or didn't see the responsiveness in their system quite in the same way.
Hmm.
So I get curious about their pattern of what they've done before and will need to gauge how much information to share with them about how this works. How do I work? And what I pay attention to, what what my what my theoretical background is, so that they have a sense of where I come from and why I might do what I do, why I want to draw their attention to their body when that's not happened for them before or it's not been available. And
Okay.
so, of course, the body isn't very available, and I might talk about why that is.
Hmm.
So, the more people have about what we could do and why, based on how much information they can take in, that can be very helpful for them to have an understanding. And so, I can explain the reason for what they experience from the theory of this model. And they get the sense of, oh, that's what it is. That makes sense. That's why I have this and this and this. Um,
Right.
and I normalize their experience, and then they're much more interested. Then they're more curious about how it could be different. Um, Now, someone who comes in and says, "Well, I'm just, I can't function. My life has just gone downhill. I can't work anymore because I'm so depressed." Um, I'm still going to be really interested in where where they've come from,
Hmm.
and despite how hard it is, how come they're here now? How did they even get here? Like there's something working
Right.
and there's something not working, their focus is on what's not working. And
Mhm.
so I need to attune to that, but I also want to draw their attention to what is working.
Right.
So as long as there's a heartbeat, something's working.
Mhm.
And people have more than that, or they wouldn't come to us. They have more than just a heartbeat. And so I also want to be able to explore what is working, because there's something about, like, when we focus on what works, things can work more.
Right.
If we only focus on what's not working, it's a different response. But I also need to attune to that. I need to listen to that. I need to reflect that to you, so so you have a sense I know, and there's also that which is working.
So that kind of trance of just focusing on what's not working,
Hmm.
kind of work with attuning to that, but also bringing in
Hmm.
the strengths and what is working. And
Right, and it may not be something big. It might be that while we talk, that I see a little smile on your face.
Mhm.
Did you notice that your mouth made a little smile?
Right.
Like, it's just like there's a moment of something working differently than before.
Right.
Right? It's like,
Mhm.
oh, I just noticed you took a bigger breath. Like, then, like, there's something working in
Mhm.
the moment. You know, they got themselves dressed. They made their way here, whether it was they walked or drove or found a ride. Like,
Mhm.
there was something in support of that to happen, right?
Right.
Something's working. So there's those pieces of their life, but there's what's happening right now as well. What is showing up that is changing as we sit together, even if it's just a moment of change.
Mhm.
That smile might never show up again in the next half hour, but
Mhm.
when it was there, or there was a little bit of brightness in the face, there was a little bit of relaxation in the muscles in the neck or somewhere. Just like,
Mhm.
oh, there's a little shift. There is something that's working. And then when that happens, and they can see it, hear it, feel it, notice it,
Mhm.
then what happens? What's different as a result of just that moment? And so we just keep doing that, and then over time it starts to become more valuable, more uh, almost more reinforcing of, there's something else that is also working while I'm suffering,
Ah,
while I'm in pain, while I'm not happy, or while I have a lot of anxiousness, whatever it is. Something else is working at the same time.
so there's a kind of that tunnel vision that happens. So it's a widening of that and seeing there's other things going on other than just that craving or
That's
that
right.
need for.
That's
Right.
that's right.
Right.
So there are these moments of high stress. There are the ways in which I have found to deal with or manage that stress,
Mhm.
and it really occupies a lot of my attention because I'm suffering in different ways, and so
Right.
I'm not paying attention to anything else because
Right.
this is so urgent, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
so then, as you come and sit and we engage, just that engagement, just sitting with someone whose nervous system is different,
Right.
whose
Yeah.
nervous system is a little bit more like this versus like this,
Mhm.
then that person has a different response, even if they don't notice the response for a while.
Right.
They come and they sit with somebody who has a different pattern in their system. It
Right.
feels different to sit here than it does to sit out there, or to sit at home, or to be on the bus, or to be out downtown,
Right.
where the nervous systems out there are are really hard to be with.
Mm-hmm.
But I come in here and you're like this. There's a
Mm-hmm.
different rhythm in our systems, and that's the idea: is that we have a different tone in our systems, so that it's picked up by those who have a less comfortable tone,
Right.
and it feels better to come in here and sit.
Right. And so part of showing up and just being present for the practitioner is that what we're bringing to the session or to the play or the practice, but what we're bringing to that is our own regulated nervous
That's
system.
right. That's right.
Yeah.
And one of the things that happens that we become more regulated over time
Right. Right.
while we practice, while we attend, while we learn, and while we work on ourselves in between.
Right.
Yeah.
Hence, what you notice with people who are engaged in between the
Yeah.
trainings. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, in your experience, can everybody heal?
Well, it depends how that's defined.
I knew you were going to say that.
So, I think everybody can change. And
Okay.
what healing means or looks like is different to each person who has an idea about it.
Mhm.
But change is always possible.
Mhm.
Um, to be healed or to be fixed, which is not a word I like. Um, Even the word healing um, can set up a particular expectation.
Right, because
Um,
it means something different to everybody.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 So, can we become better? Can our systems become better regulated? Yes, and better is relative to each person's state. And so, yes, I think that is what happens. Like, it happens moment to moment when we're not even aware of it. There's
Mhm.
something, to have a drink as a way to feel better. Then I
Mhm.
feel better, and my system settles. But it doesn't settle by itself. It's settled because of the drink.
Right.
So it can change if it has the right support. Um, so change is possible. Healing happens, but how do we know? What's the clue or the marker? Is it now I have no problems anymore? I have no stress. I have no addiction anymore. Like, what's the marker of healing?
Mhm. So would that be something you would explore with people?
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah. An old question is, how will we know we're done?
Right.
But what's going to let you know you don't need to be here anymore?
Mhm.
And we all have an idea of that.
Mhm.
And sometimes we don't even have to get 50% of my list accomplished to then go, this is good.
Mhm.
I think this is enough because so much has changed. We make one slight change, it changes everything.
Right.
The whole system responds to one small change, and it reorganizes itself.
Right.
So the more little pieces of change that happens, the more it has an influence on the whole system. So some people never get to resolve all their trauma because they don't need to, because they become more resilient. They have more capacity, and that which was once disturbing is no longer that, because they just have more capacity than they had before to be in life, to be responsive to what happens now, and less caught
Right.
in the past.
Right. Right. Yeah, and that would be a pretty okay place to be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm.
So is this training for everybody?
No,
The somatic
no.
experiencing training? What are you looking for kind of in this?
Well, it's not a training for people to come and get their work done, which some people think it is.
Mhm.
It's a training to support your profession, to give you more tools,
Mhm.
to give you a perspective of what is happening for the person who I work with as I talk about this or as they talk about that.
Mhm.
What is the body doing that like this whole being has a response to what's happened and to what's happening. And so if people are interested in that, if they want to bring that into their work, then it's something for them.
Mhm.
Um, and um, so maybe I'll change my answer to your question: is this training for everybody? It could be if you have an interest in incorporating the body's response into the work. And
Okay.
why would you take it if you weren't really?
Mhm.
I think there's a reason you're there, and there's something about it that speaks to people. Um, and do you have enough stability to be able to navigate the 36 days of the training
Right. Mhm.
where your capacity is not challenged? There's not too much of a demand on you. We are in the business of putting a demand on our clients so they can grow. So if there isn't a demand, change won't happen.
Ah,
But
mhm.
we have to gauge the demand so that it's not too big,
Right.
so that they can not fall into the reinforcement of they can't do something. So there has to be a demand, but it can't be too big. So as somebody taught me to think about, like, there needs to be a stretching, but not a tearing.
Right, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the same for anyone who takes the training. There's a stretching of their understanding, of their way of being with people, of their own capacity to be with what is stirred up and stay present.
Mhm.
And it could be hard, but it's not so hard that you can't do it.
Right.
So
Yeah.
to build a muscle, then it has to be stretched.
Mhm. Right.
But if you lift too much, it tears, and
It does. Yeah.
then that's not good.
Yeah. Right. Hmm.
Oh, I was a little ambitious there.
So how do people get a hold of you if they would like to pursue this a little bit more?
Well, they don't really need to get a hold of me. They can, but if they were to go on the institute's website, they would see where all the trainings are happening around the world.
Mhm.
Um, and then people either choose where they go based on where they live
Mhm.
or their schedule. Um,
Right.
some people get a connection with a trainer and want to go to that person's training.
Right.
It's more often around location.
Right.
What's more economical. Traumahealing.org is
Traumahealing.org.
the
Okay.
address. Yeah, the Somatic Experiencing Trauma Institute. That's their website.
Right. Okay. So what advice would you have or what would you like to say just before we close to someone who maybe is having some issues with addiction, their nervous system, and they would like to know just some what would you like to say to them?
I believe that whatever someone is engaged in is because that's what they know to do. That's their best choice in the moment,
Mhm.
and it's in service of feeling better. Like, there is a strong desire to feel better.
Right.
We seem to be driven, right, to do whatever we can to feel better
Right.
and to make things go away or make things bigger, like to feel more or to feel less. Right? those are the two basic processes: to feel more or to feel less. And so there's something that's too hard. So we choose to do this thing that leads to a pattern of having to do it again and again and again. And but there's such a longing for it to be different, and that I'm really interested in. Like what is that force or that drive or that pull for something to be different? And it's such a mixed thing. Like it's got it's got the dark side and the light side at the same time, and they're both important. They both need to be acknowledged and explored. And so if someone is struggling with an addiction or with a sense of not having control, um, there there's the other side of that, where there's the desire for that to be different.
Mm-hmm.
And that, like, there's so much richness in that. There's so much life in that. And can that be given some attention? Can that be what brings you into talking to somebody to make a difference or to make a different choice? Sometimes it's the desperation or the like the last straw, or the car accident or the falling over or something, that's what brings people in. And then we can still look at that you are here and that there is something you want,
Right.
and that change is possible. Now the two of us get to work on what that change might be, but
Mm-hmm.
change is definitely possible.
Right. Well, thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you so much it's really fascinating to talk about this and to get a bit of a glimpse into the whole world of somatic experiencing and our nervous system and being settled and
Mhm.
how all that works.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, thanks for your curiosity.
Oh, you're very welcome. Hello, this is Lynn Fraser with the Killaby Center Radical Recovery Summit. We are so excited to bring you the lineup for January 10th to 19th, 2020. Go to radicalrecoverysummit.com to see the new headliners for 2020 and to sign up. You can watch free January 10th to 19th or buy an all-access pass.